It is a very rainy day today, so the audio might be filled with thunder. But I didn't want to wait any longer to start this project. I'm Dixie, and on this channel I share my historical costumes. And I have been doing costuming for several years now, and in that time there have been some less than perfect costumes. Not everything can be a winner, but luckily with old clothing, they tend to use so much fabric that you can cut them down and remake them into something else later if you want. And this is exactly what people used to do back in the day. And why not do it now with the costumes that I have and I'm not using? And I thought we could also talk about managing expectations when you are new to this hobby. Because when you start out, not everything is going to be perfect and not everything is going to come out the way you wanted. And even after you've been doing things for a long time, there are still ways that you can mess up. That's not surprising if you have seen any of my videos. But first, let's talk about the actual costumes that I have that I would like to make over and why. This blue dress is actually my first Regency era costume that I ever made, and I hated it. I used a simplicity pattern, which that was my first mistake because the sizing was just so off and there was way too much ease. So like the bodice just did not fit. I cut this thing down and it looks completely different than what the pattern originally was. I made this dress, I took pictures, and I never wore it again. With this one, I was thinking, oh, maybe I could do like a 1920s day dress because there's enough fabric in the skirt to make something out of it. That's dress number one. After I made that dress, I actually made another dress that did turn out well and I liked it, and that made me want to try again. I then took that same pattern and tried to make a white striped dress, except that pattern was front closing and I wanted a back closing dress. So I thought, oh, I'll just like convert it to back closing. That would have gone okay, except for I stopped working on this thing like halfway through. And I put it aside for months and months. So then I picked it back up and forgot that I needed to cut the back pieces wider than what I had originally done. I didn't make myself a note or anything to remind myself of that. I just completely forgot. I just continued on as if there were no issues until I tried the dress on and realized that the back did not fit. Now, I do still have a decent amount of this striped cotton fabric, and I'm debating whether or not I should just cut the whole dress apart and make something new. I was thinking of like a Edwardian shirtwaist, or I could just take the bodice apart, recut a new back, and then remake it as is, and it just would be a wearable dress. I don't know. I haven't decided. And lastly is another Regency dress. And the problem with this one was the skirt is just too narrow. So the hem of this skirt isn't even 60 inches in circumference. It's like 56 inches. 56 inches is not enough for a Regency skirt. Minimum would be like 90 inches. And it's sad because I added 2 rows of ruffles. I lined the bodice. I mean, otherwise it fits. But I knew as soon as I finished it that it just wasn't going to work. And I never even took pictures in it. This is the dress that I think I'm actually going to cut up today and work with. I really like this fabric. It is a cotton lawn with some satin stripes running through it. And I have an idea of making a matching set of whites for my 18th century costume. And then from there I will see how much fabric I have left and maybe I can do something else with it. I'm using the American Duchess 18th century dressmaking book as inspiration for these relatively simple projects. A frilly apron and a set of sleeve and neckline ruffles, but I'm not following the directions exactly. This was a dress I made fairly early on in my costuming journey, and even though I'd been sewing modern clothes for years and years at that point, historical sewing was challenging. No matter what your previous experience, this hobby is challenging. And knowing that can intimidate a lot of people from getting started. You're not just sewing the dress, you're researching, you're studying special construction techniques. You're learning to fit real human bodies. You're making multiple undergarments to go with that dress. Newbies worry that they'll make mistakes, that what they make won't be as good in real life as what they envisioned, that it'll take a long time to get good at it. Do you really want to devote yourself to a hobby for possibly years, before you have good quality costumes to show for it. This is often a very slow hobby, especially if you're developing your hand sewing skills. You might feel like a beginner for a long time. I get it, but I want to encourage you to do it anyway. What's stopping you from getting started? Are you afraid of ruining that expensive silk? That's what bedsheet mock-ups are for. Are you afraid of your body changing and your dress won't fit? Cut extra wide seam allowances and keep all of your scraps. Are you afraid of the cost? Sew in stages while you save up for more materials. Salvage fabric from thrift stores. Are you afraid you can't properly fit your body's shape? This is probably the hardest part, but there are lots of blogs, books, and online groups out there willing to help. Are you afraid you won't have the physical or mental ability to do it? Take your time and give yourself some grace. Are you afraid your fabric or your stitch length isn't historically accurate? Gatekeeping has no place in the costuming community, nor in your own brain. Learn to embrace historical adequacy. Are you afraid you won't look good in a costume? Living in a world where we are expected to abide by unrealistic or even unachievable beauty standards is rough. And wherever you are in your journey of self-acceptance, I have compassion for you. But you deserve to have a hobby that gives you joy, and I don't want you to miss out on that by never giving it a try in the first place. And if you mess up royally and your dress doesn't turn out the way you want, guess what? The reward for failing to sew a dress is you get to sew another dress, or breeches, or suit, or whatever it is. So maybe you decide to give it a go and you get started, and later you finished a costume or two. Maybe it took you way longer than you expected. Maybe they didn't turn out perfectly and you know what you'd change if you do it all over again. You've spent hours and hours researching the era of your choice, and you have probably gotten into more than one fight in the comments section of social media posts that spread myths about corsets. Congratulations! You've now graduated to the intermediate stage of costuming. And you wonder to yourself, do I have enough experience to not make the same silly mistakes I did when I was just starting out? No. You will still make mistakes. Except now you know enough to know you're doing it wrong. Remember that blue Regency dress I had made? At that point, I had done enough research that when I was in the middle of sewing the dress, I realized it just wasn't going to look right for the time period I was after. The back waist was dragging too low, the sleeves were awkwardly poofy, not elegantly poofy, and the bodice didn't fit at all. I ended up ditching the poofy sleeve for plain sleeves and resewing the bodice and restyling the neckline. In the end, it was a hodgepodge of early and late Regency styles, and I was very, very disappointed. But if you're brand new to that era and saw that dress, you'd probably think it was fine. But I knew it was wrong, and I hated it. I felt like I was stuck in this stage for a long time. Even though I was advancing my skills, I was still making little mistakes here and there, like using the wrong materials, not having the correct tools, cutting corners because of strict deadlines, or even just accidentally skipping major steps in a project and having to backtrack. So if you're in this realm right now, you're probably wondering, am I ever going to get good at this hobby? Yes, but I have to let you in on a secret. Even after you've been sewing for years and years, you're still going to make mistakes. But they won't be the same mistakes as earlier in your costuming career. Your mistakes won't be from ignorance, but from taking risks. You'll order a mystery fabric online, and when it arrives, you'll realize it's not right for your project, but you'll try to make it work anyway. You'll try out a new pattern, and halfway through you'll learn the hard way that it is poorly drafted, and you need to start from scratch. Or, more commonly for me, you'll be sewing when you have absolutely no business sewing at that moment. Like when it's 2 a.m. and you should have been in bed hours ago. So naturally, you accidentally cut out that front bodice piece twice, and now you don't have enough fabric left over to cut your sleeves. But making mistakes and learning something new go hand in hand, so the good part is that even if you've been sewing historical costumes for years and years, you still get to learn new skills and techniques all the time. And maybe you'll even have an old project or two that you can refashion into something new. And all that previous experience will give you the confidence to dive in deeper. This is the stage that I'm at now, and I truly hope that if you're not here already, that you get here soon. I now know enough about sewing in historical fashion that if I'm faced with something I've never done before, like a new technique or a new era, I know that I can figure it out. I've already learned all these other skills, and that might have been hard, but I still did it. I've learned when I can safely break the rules or take a risk, like deviating from pattern instructions. That doesn't mean that learning won't be frustrating or that I won't make mistakes, but I know that I can do it. And so can you. Whether you want to make a historical costume or do anything creative, please don't let the fear of messing up keep you from getting started. But even if you do make mistakes, you can always go back and fix them later. Or you can tear the dress apart and make something brand new. But you can't wear a dress you've never made. I originally finished this gown last year. You may have seen the 2 videos I made for it. When I did, I unfortunately made the front of the dress too small. So since then, I went back and completely replaced the front bodice panels because I had enough leftover fabric. I also added ties to the inside of the skirt so I could pull it up and wear it retroussé or polonaise style. And I made this new silk taffeta petticoat to go with it. As for the apron and the ruffles, it is hot outside. I think the projects turned out pretty well. The apron is very floofy. I did follow the dimensions in the book, and I think I probably could have made that apron a little bit shorter and a little bit narrower, and it still would have been good. It's like a very large apron. But it just so happened that the 2 ruffles that were originally on the dress were the exact length that I needed to go around the body of the apron according to the book. So that was perfect. My only issue is the ruffles still have the fold line from where they were folded on the dress, and I'm hoping that maybe if I washed this, that crease would come out. As for the ruffles, I think they turned out perfectly. I have a little bit of fabric left. I have like 1 sleeve and like a small section of the skirt. Since this dress was basically made out of 1 width of fabric, the 54 inches around, it wasn't a lot of yardage in the dress, and this apron took up so much of that. So I have enough that maybe I could squeeze out a small cap and maybe get some ruffles, but I would have to piece them together out of the sleeves. Otherwise, I don't know what else I could do with the small chunks that I have left. Thank you for watching. Tell me in the comments which of the other 2 dresses you want me to make over next, the blue one or the other white striped dress. And if you are someone who is new to this hobby, let me know what is keeping you from getting started. Or if you've been doing this for a while, did anything stop you from getting started back when you were a beginner? And how do you feel now that you've been wearing or making costumes for a while? All right, I'm gonna get out of this gear and go drink some cold water because it is Texas, it is hot, and this is a lot. If you want to support me more, you can stick around and watch more videos. Bye.